안녕하십니까. Future Direction of Soft Education 좌장을 맡은 서울대학교의 차상균 교수입니다. 지금 오디언스를 보니까 대체로 다 한국 분이라서 제가 일단 한국말로 하겠습니다. I'll have to speak in Korean as most of the audience is in Korean. So 뭐 아시다시피 그 세계는 점점 그 소프트웨어, 눈에 보이지 않는 소프트웨어 가치가 눈에 보이고 만질 수 있는 그런 하드웨어 가치보다 더 높아지는 그런 소프트웨어 중심 사회로 옮겨가고 있습니다. 그래서 이 세션은 이 소프트웨어, 우리가 앞으로 우리나라의 미래를 준비함에 있어서 어떻게 그 소프트웨어 교육을 이 현장에서 반영을 하고 또 어떻게 또 확산하는가에 대한 고민을 가지고 만들어진 세션입니다. 그래서 다행스럽게도 오늘 이 세션에는 정말 모시기 힘든 그런 두 분을 모셨습니다. 두 캠프, 제가 이제 말할 때 두 캠프의 어떤 대표적인 인사들을 모셨다고 생각하시면 되겠는데요. 한 캠프는 그 첫 번째 스피커로서 제임스 구버츠만, 이분은 좀 더 미국의 서부의 어떤 그 벤처 경험을 가지고 좀 더 just do it 하는 그런 그 빨리 실행하는 그런 execution oriented 된 그런 진정을 이라고 할 수 있는 code.org의 작년까지 칩 이벤젤리스트로서 전도사 역할을 하신 분이고요. 또 다른 한 분은 이 대학에서 시작을 해서 이 스크래치, 여러분들 잘 아시는 스크래치를 만든 실제로 개발하신 야스민 카파이 교수님, 좀 더 이제 오랫동안 연구를 하고 준비해 오신 그런 분이시고요. 그 두 분을 우리가 한 자리에 이렇게 모시게 된 게 참 저희들 입장에서는 정말 어떻게 보면 다행스러운 것이라고 할 수 있겠습니다. 그리고 아울러 이 두 분의 강연에 이어서 우리나라에서 소프트웨어 교육을 준비하시는데 좀 앞장서고 계시는 두 분의 교수님을 모셨습니다. 서정연 정보과학교육연합회 회장님이시고요. 서강대학교 전산학과 교수님이십니다. 그리고 김현철 교수님은 실제로 이 소프트웨어 교육 과정을 준비하는데 정말 앞장서서 실제로 일을 하시는 그런 고려대학교의 김현철 교수님이시고요. 그다음에 이제 우리 학교 현장을 대표해서 이 선화여중의 김태민 교장님을 모셨습니다. 그래서 우리가 앞으로 한 90분 동안 두 분의 강연을 듣고 또 세 분의 또 이 코멘트를 듣고 난 다음에 실제 여기 계시는 분들도 질문을 좀 하실 수 있도록 그렇게 기회를 만들어 보겠습니다. 감사합니다. 우선 첫 번째 연사로 let's welcome Mr. James Gwartzman, former chief evangelist of Code.org. He is currently running a startup, his own startup, game company called the PlayFab. So let's welcome Mr. James Gwartzman.
Thank you. Thank you. So in America, we have this idea of something called the American dream. And the idea of the American dream is that anything is possible if you work hard, no matter what sort of family you're born into, no matter what sort of color of your skin or your economic background. And the American dream is alive and well today. Companies like Facebook are famous for being started in a dormitory room, or companies like Google are famous for being started in a garage. So the American dream is alive and well and in the field of technology. However, we have a problem. In America, only 10% of schools actually teach computer science. Computers are changing everything, and yet not many students have access to this sort of understanding. We believe firmly that in this day and age, not learning how to code is like not learning how to read and write or not learning how to do simple arithmetic. And while it's true that some students will learn how to do this at home to teach themselves, many others will not. We believe that schools have a very important role to introducing students to computer science so that they can learn and discover a passion which they can then choose to pursue. Now, it is true that many people might think computer science education is rising. After all, it seems obvious that computers are here to stay. However, this is actually not true. In fact, computer science education, at least in America, is only now starting to recover from what was a 10-year-long decline. There are actually fewer students learning computers now than 10 years ago, which is crazy when you consider how the world has changed. Here's a graph, for example, of the number of computer science students graduating each year in America over the last 15 years. And the numbers are going up again, which is good. But if you look at the number of women who are graduating with computer science degrees, it's terrible. Only a small fraction of the total students graduating are female. Now, some people might think that only high-tech companies in places like California are complaining about the lack of computer science students. However, this is not something that only affects a small number of companies. This is actually something that affects every company across the world. Every company is desperately trying to hire computer programmers. Why? Because computer science is more than just teaching about technology. Computer science is actually a much broader application. Computer science is a whole different way of thinking. We call it computational thinking. It's the idea that learning how to program a computer is actually teaching you a certain type of problem solving and a certain type of creativity. Consider, for example, the world's first computer. This first computer was built in 1943. Let's now consider the first computer programmer. We might argue she was a woman named Ada Lovelace who lived almost 100 years earlier. We call her the first computer programmer because she wrote the first computer program, and she was thinking about computer programming long before there were actually computers, because she was thinking about algorithms, and she was thinking about how to apply algorithmic approaches to solve problems. She came up with the idea of how algorithms can be used to manage machines and solve programs. So if you can consider the role of technology, it's not just IT anymore. Technology is now affecting every single field, from medicine to space to athletics to sports. We all carry around phones in our pocket. These phones wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for software. There's not a single industry these days that is not affected in some way by computers. Some people complain that computer science is just a vocation, that the only reason to learn how to program is if you choose to go into the IT field to get a job. However, we disagree. We believe that it's actually foundational, that in fact, this is a core set of skills that's the heart of being successful in the modern age. Consider, for example, some student who's graduating school in the year 2030. What sort of a career 15 years from now will that student be able to have? That student doesn't know how to program computers. We used to be able to say that you can always get a job, for example, cooking, we call it flipping burgers in a restaurant or perhaps driving a truck. But nowadays, even computers are flipping burgers and driving trucks. So in fact, every field is being touched by technology. And just like nowadays we teach things in schools like basic biology or how electricity works or how to prove a basic theorem, we believe this is not because we think every student should become a biologist or an electrician or a mathematician. It's because we believe every student needs to know a basic knowledge of how the world works. And that's why we believe also every student should be learning the basics of computer science. Because schools must evolve as the world around us evolves. And in today's day and age, it's just as important that you learn what an algorithm is or how the internet works as you know basic biology or how electricity works. So can schools actually change? Can schools evolve to keep up with these changes? So let's look at some of the numbers. On one hand, we have job growth that is outpacing students 3-to-1. By the year 2020, there will be 1 million jobs in computer science unfilled because we don't have enough students to fill those jobs. That's a big problem. In America, we also have complaints about a shrinking middle class. these happen to be some of the highest paying jobs in the world. In fact, this year, students graduating with computer science degrees were getting across the board the highest average salaries coming out of school. So there's this huge demand, and in a time when there's a shrinking middle class, this would seem like a huge opportunity. However, the education system really is stuck in the past. Consider, for example, the role of, in America we call it STEM, science, technology, engineering, math. We have been successful in getting more students to study STEM. However, if you consider all the students who are studying math and science, only 2% of those students are actually studying computer science, compared to, say, biology or chemistry. And yet, if you look at the jobs, 60% of the jobs are computing jobs out of the total pool of all math and science jobs. So there's this huge gap between what students are studying and where the actual needs are in the industry. Now consider the nature of work. This is a graph showing how the nature of work is changing. It used to be just being able to apply rote processes was enough for a good job. However, nowadays, the role of work is changing. People need to know how to deal with unstructured information. They need to know how to break down problems and do their own data analysis. These are all the kinds of work that computer science teaches you. Consider now the school. The question is, in a day and age when computers are having such a transformational effect in society, what can our schools do to keep up? What can our schools do to keep up? And this now brings us to what Code.org is. So Code.org is an organization I'm very proud to be associated with. I joined Code.org 2.5 years ago, and I helped run a program we're about to talk about called the Hour of Code. And I have to say it was the most fun and most exciting part of my entire career so far. So Code.org is dedicated to the idea that every school and every student should have the opportunity to study computer science. So we're a nonprofit. We have 3 parts of our organization. We have an educational piece, we have a government relations piece, and we have a marketing piece. So in education, we have created a curriculum which teaches computer science to elementary school, K through 5, middle school, 6 through 8, and high school, 9 through 12. We have up to 100 hours of computer science curriculum that we've been teaching teachers across America how to apply in schools. We work with the government to change laws that prevent computer science from being taught in schools. Many of them are just silly, outdated laws. And finally, we have a marketing piece where we try to encourage everyone everywhere to try computer science. And that's where the Hour of Code comes in. So the Hour of Code is a global program designed to get every single student to do a 1-hour-long introduction to computer science. Here in Korea, for example, the Hour of Code is now entering its 3rd year. And in Korea, we've already had more than 150,000 students do the Hour of Code. The first year we ran the Hour of Code, when I was running it, we successfully had 40 million students around the world do this 1-hour introduction. Last year, we got up to about 125 million students do the Hour of Code. This year, we're hoping it'll be even bigger than that. We've had students from all across the world do this Hour of Code. We've had hundreds of articles written about this effort, and I'm now going to show you a brief video introducing you what the Hour of Code is.
Okay, now you're going to press run. This is so cool!
Hour of Code.
The Hour of Code. Todo lo pueden hacer.
Я программе код. من 42 خط کد.
Your teacher says you guys are into it.
We are. It's very awesome.
Code.org has partnered with 30 public school districts across the country, including New York, Chicago, and Denver, to provide lessons in teacher training and writing.
The largest education events in history.
Organizers set what they called an ambitious goal, reaching 10 million students this week. Almost 15 million signed up.
This week, I'm proud to join the students, teachers, businesses, and nonprofit organizations taking new steps to support computer science in America's schools.
I ran an Hour of Code. It was easy to do.
I got it.
They've been so excited about it.
They don't even have to be a computer science engineer. Maybe they want to do something else. But in our world, this is going to be the basis for everything that we do.
Move. Semicolon.
when you're building a program, you have to think outside of the box.
If you can change technology, you can change the world.
I challenge girls in every single country to learn 1 hour of code.
Every district should do, every district can do it.
Please help us get the Hour of Code to every school and every classroom and every child.
And my school's doing it.
So one thing I want to point out, in that video you saw President Obama writing some code. We believe he was the first US president to ever actually do a little bit of programming, and that was in December of last year. So the natural question is, what can you do in an hour? Like, what's the benefit of the hour of code? Well, you're not going to learn that much in 1 hour. What you are going to learn in 1 hour is that computer science is not scary. It's not something that's only for geeks and nerds. It's actually kind of fun. And part of how we've been so successful at Code.org is we've made our education fun. We're sexy. We worked last year with Disney. Disney contributed the characters from the movie Frozen, which we used in the Hour of Code last year. The year before that, we got the companies Rovio to contribute Angry Birds and Plants vs. Zombies for the Hour of Code. So we've adopted all the tools of pop culture. We have celebrities producing videos. If you do the Hour of Code, you'll see a video in there from Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates, as well as celebrities and athletes and basketball stars all contributing and doing a little bit of coding. But it's not, of course, the goal is not just the Hour of Code. The Hour of Code is really just the start. What we really want to do is, after students do the Hour of Code, we want them to then go on and do the next 100 hours of programming. And we have a complete curriculum which is free and available to anyone, which we've been encouraging schools around the world to adopt and bring into their schools. We have something called Code Studio, which is basically a tool for teachers to use to introduce computer science in their classroom. It has video. The teachers are people like Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg, who are teaching you, the student, how to do the coding. And the teachers themselves don't need to know anything about programming. The videos and the materials sort of teach themselves. And so we have these fundamentals for K through 5, 20 lessons, 40 minutes each. And then beyond that, we also have curriculum for middle school and for high school. And this is what it looks like. You can see the sorts of characters and graphics that we've adopted. You can see teachers have a chance to have this dashboard that allows them to track a student's progress and see how their students are progressing as they go through it. It's available on any PC. It's available on any tablet or mobile phone. We even have unplugged versions for schools that don't have computers or tablets. Students can actually learn the basics of programming with no technology at all. And so I took a screenshot. It's fully localized. I took a screenshot last night of the Hour of Code in Korean. So you can see this is from last year. We're going to have a new version out this year. And you don't have to learn English to do this. So I guess my call to action to all of you is try the Hour of Code. You can do it right now or this afternoon by going to hourofcode.com and take an hour. And maybe for some of you, it might be your first time doing any programming. I want to encourage you to bring the Hour of Code to your schools. All the curriculum is free. Any teacher can choose to turn this on in their classroom and start using it. But obviously, it's more effective when an entire school or an entire school district or an entire country chooses to adopt it. I know that here in Korea, computer science education is mandatory, starting, I believe, in a year, which is fantastic. I realize that there are probably many teachers out there who are nervous about this. Professional development is always a challenge, and I think we've been doing professional development now in America for Code.org for more than a year, and we found that this sort of approach is very popular with teachers because they don't have to learn the material, they just have to learn to run the programs. The material teaches itself. And finally, all the curriculum we have is open source. We encourage you to adopt it, make it your own. We'd love to collaborate with Korea to bring Code.org and the Hour of Code to your schools. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Kwartzman, for the excellent introduction of the Code.org and also the motivating the audience to get into the Code.org. Our second speaker is Professor Yasmin Kafai from University of Pennsylvania. I learned that she was born in Iran. No? Germany? Oh, sorry. So she's born in Germany, and but you have Iranian origin, right? It's the same. The founders of Code.org also all came from Iran, as I remember, and she did her master in Technische Universität in Berlin. 베를린 공과대학에서 석사를 냈고요. 그다음에 she moved to U.S. and she did her PhD from Harvard University, and among others, she worked with Professor the Resnick from MIT Media Lab and developed the Scratch. So let's welcome Professor Kafai.
Welcome. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about as children as designers, programmers, and makers for the 21st century. And I think we are in exciting times, as you heard from our previous speaker. Hour of Code 2 years ago got millions and continues to get millions of kids introduced into programming. Some of you might know last year the United Kingdom decided to implement a nationwide school curriculum of computer science, and this is just the beginning. There are more efforts underway. But I think in this moment of opportunity, we also have great problems, as Jay pointed out. In particular, in the United States, as recent reports pointed out, we actually don't have a computer science curriculum. We have very few teachers. And if you can see in the middle, very few students, as you saw the numbers, are actually taking the AP exam, the Advanced Placement exam in computer science, which allows you usually, makes it easier to continue taking computer science in college. And there are some states, you will not believe this, where not one student has taken that exam, and that continues to be the case. So I think there are a lot of challenges ahead. You know, I hate to be the kind of downer after all the excitement of talking about computer science. And the reason why I'm doing this, because many of you are too young to remember, but 20, 30 years ago, millions of children all over the world were already programming. We already had computer science and programming in school. And some of you might remember the name of Seymour Papert, who was the co-inventor of Logo. And in 1980, he wrote a very seminal book called Mindstorms, introducing the world to the idea that computers were not just there for work, but also for children to learn. And that was, if you can remember, a very controversial, a very bold proposal, the idea that children's dirty little fingers would touch these very expensive machines, which people were only using at the workplace. And I put up a few images just to show you what the original turtle, which actually was a physical object which moved around the screen, as well as could move around on the floor and draw things. And I also put an image of the school in the late 1980s, which Seymour Papert started, called Project Headlight, where we put hundreds of computers in an elementary school and made it part of the daily curriculum. So rather than just going once a week for 45 minutes to a computer lab, which was locked, and you would program a Christmas tree if the holiday season came along, an Easter bunny, you would kind of actually on a daily basis integrate it into the mathematics, science, and writing curriculum. And notice something else on the picture here. What you see is that the computers are out in the open. Everybody who comes and goes can see what's going on. So this was 25 years ago. And then the internet came around, the multimedia CD-ROMs, and suddenly it was much easier to communicate with a computer just with a click of the mouse. And schools, teachers, and everybody decided collectively that programming was no longer needed. But I think we have actually learned a few things. Thousands of studies with hundreds of thousands of students were conducted 20 years ago, programming in Logo, BASIC, Pascal, and other languages you might not, familiar with, in classrooms all over the world. And this is what I want to talk with you about. Two things. There are only two things which you need to remember from my talk. Yes, I am in favor of computational thinking, but I think what we've learned is that computer science is not just about problem solving, it's a social activity today. So I want to talk about what it means to be engaged in computational participation. And the second thing I want to talk about is the broadening participation. We all talk about how few women and students of underrepresented groups are involved in programming, and I think that issue is not, limited to the United States. I want to talk, yes, we need to broaden participation. Everybody needs to get involved, but we also need to deepen it. We need to kind of engage students deeply beyond the 45 minutes. So let me start with the first part on how we can move from computational thinking to computational participation. So computational thinking, as Jay pointed out, is kind of the rallying cry for bringing computing back into school. What does computational thinking actually mean? Here is a short definition which Carnegie Mellon professor Janet Wing wrote in 2006, nearly 10 years ago, when she was trying to capture the essence of computer science. And I cannot agree more that solving problems, designing systems, and understanding human behavior is really important. And I think all of us in this room understand that computing isn't just in computer science, it's in all the disciplines, everywhere. You carry it in your pocket if you pull out your mobile phone. So what I want to suggest is that we kind of move beyond this focus on thinking. And in the longer code.org video, which Jay didn't show you, but you can go online and look at it, there is a quote by the late Steve Jobs who actually says everybody in this country should learn how to program a computer because it teaches you how to think. Yes, but I think we need to kind of cast a broader net. It's not just about the lone person sitting in front of a computer solving a problem. This is not how software is designed today. We have large teams of people who work together. We need to think about programming as a social activity, and that's why I'm talking about computational participation. Because people today need to participate in a networked society. We're no longer alone. We're communicating. Systems are communicating, and computing is part of that. So the big challenge then is, and I think this is really what you here in South Korea, we in the United States and everywhere else are facing. How do we think about this from a curriculum perspective? I want to share with you 3 ways on how we can think about designing curriculum and bringing it into the schools to make computational participation a reality. And here are 3 strands. I want to talk about how we should move from just coding to applications, from tools to communities, and from scratch to remix. So let me explain those a little bit in more detail. So 25, 30 years ago, when people were writing code, it usually looked like what you see on the left side, long strings of text. And you can already see for 8- and 9-year-olds, a lot of opportunities to make typos and syntax. So that's why in Scratch, like in many other programming languages today, we use a visual block interface where you don't type a lot, you actually move the control structures around in order to make programs. But I think what was really critical 30 years ago, we thought about teaching programming for the sake of programming. Kids learned coding for the sake of coding. And honestly, it wasn't very interesting for a lot of kids. They didn't see any relevance to their lives, to the curriculum, and they also were not engaged in very complex problems. And so this is why I think we need to move away from just teaching coding to really think about coding in context. And what better context is there on creating applications like the apps you have on your phone, like the games kids love to design because they play them all the time, like stories, animation, graphics. There are hundreds of different applications we can think about for any age group, and they provide a perfect context to situate coding. So not just teaching coding for the sake of coding, but making it meaningful, relevant, and engaging students in complexity. And I think the tools today are there to make that happen. The second thing I want to talk about is what kind of programming tools. And I think the discussion starts already. Should we use Java, Python, Scratch? I mean, there are hundreds of programming tools, in particular developed for beginners. Computer scientists love to design programming languages because that's computer scientists. But I think that's not enough. Because we all know for people who come engaged, they look for communities. And I think what Scratch has shown us, because Scratch, when it was released in 2007, wasn't just a programming tool. It was also a community where with a click of a button, you could upload your program and share it with thousands and now millions of other people. And I think this taught us unintentionally, I really have to admit this because we started focusing first just on the tool, is that kids not only love to program, but they even love more to share their programs, use others' program. And so this is why I think we need to move from tools to communities. And I think that's very important if we think about classrooms, because classrooms are already local communities, schools. So, and that's why I argue programming is a social activity. We participate computationally. We're not just thinking about things, we're actually engaged socially. And lastly, I want to raise a point which is probably a little bit controversial in school. What you see here is actually an older version of the Scratch programming screen, and it looks like many screens, it's empty. You know, it's a blank screen. And we teach programming in school often by asking students to create all the code from scratch, no pun intended, because we think that's it. But the reality is professional programmers don't program this way. If they do something, they go on the net to GitHub and other places and look what people have already programmed and copy the code. So I think what we have to do in schools, we also have to adopt this cultural practice to move from Scratch to Remix and give kids programs which are there, ask them to modify. And Remix programs, and I just put up a few screens of Pong, which was one of the first computer games, and it's also a very popular game on the Scratch community. Hundreds of remixes have been created. And I think we can harness this very successfully for schools as a teaching principle. Now, some of you might think, well, copy and code from somebody else, that's cheating because you didn't create it. But no, remixing is everywhere. Music is remixed, graphics is remixed, text is remixed. Why shouldn't be programs remixed as well? And I think these three steps, thinking about coding in terms of what you make meaningful applications and you can connect them to curricular content. Thinking about it as a social activity, not one where each student just on his or her own thinks through a problem but does it collaboratively. And also using remixing is really the way to go. So if we can agree that computational participation, that programming as a social activity is important, how can we not only broaden but also deepen participation? Because I think this is really the challenge we have in school. We not just want to reach everyone, we want to make everybody competent. So I think about it from three perspectives: access, activities, and communities. And access, yes, we still have an access issue, and I put up here a few examples on how to showcase that programming can have different groups. In the United States, you have Girls Who Code, Black Girls Who Code. Google made a really nice video, Things Made with Code, to illustrate, to reach out to different communities. But we also need to think about deepen activities and kind of what we're making. Yes, computer games are great, but they also happen to be an area, even though, as you heard at the conference here, I mean, women are now the largest group of players in the category of 30 to 40-year-olds. It still is a very segregated community. Girls are really not welcome. So here's a great example. Yes, robotics activities are great, but I'm also suggesting to think about electronic textiles, making wearables. I think many of you might actually have a Fitbit or Apple iWatch. So why not think about activities in a more broader sense? And I'm happy that Jay brought up Ada Lovelace, because the first program of computing was designed for looms which wove the jacquard fabrics of the time. So textiles, if you want, were actually at the origins of computing. Many people forget that today. Fashion drove technology. And then I want to talk about a third point, deepening participation. And what you see here is actually an outdated graph. You can see in 2013, when Hour of Code came the first time around, you see that spike. The activity on the Scratch community. Yes, we have about, I think over 8 million projects, over 1 million of members who do in Scratch, great numbers, and they're increasing. But I actually conducted a back-end analysis to find out a little bit more on who is actually programming. Is actually everybody there? And so we took a random sample of 5,000 users who logged in January 2012, and about half of them never posted anything. But half of them did post a project. And then they engaged in different types of activities, of downloading projects which other people had designed, commenting, connecting with others, and also some people were very heavily engaged in everything. But if we looked over a 3-month time period, what we see from January to March is that actually only the group of high networkers stays consistent. And those are about 7% of the participants. The rest of the groups, this is a very complex statistical analysis, actually stays where they are. So which, in a nutshell, many kids, even though they go online and do things in Scratch, they never move into the more complex forms of participation. People also kind of very active in terms of commenting on projects and providing support. And this actually illustrates really nicely how programming is a form of participation. And if we look at who is actually engaged in programming, remember, this is the back-end data and it's random users. We didn't cherry pick our participants. Lo and behold, the upper group, class number 4, 8%, are the groups who use a lot of the different program concepts. The rest of participants really don't. So for me, and I'm not presenting more detail here on the analysis, it happens to be that the girls are in the red group, in the low group, and the boys are in the upper group. So even if we have millions of participants in the Hour of Code, millions of people who go to Scratch and many other communities, we are replicating a lot of the kind of lack of diversity we have already in the community. And this is why I think getting programming into schools is so important, because in schools we're not satisfied with having just 8% of the students to succeed. We want everybody to succeed and be up there in the upper graph and not in the lower graph. So computational participation is really about making it accessible to everyone and not just a few. And I think schools, teachers play a critical but also very hard role in making this happen. And I hope I showed you a few ways on how we now, based on 20 years of experience, can think about doing this. And if you want to find out more, there's a book which I wrote, which kind of outlines and pulls all of this together with a former teacher, a student of mine, so you have both the research and teaching perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for Professor Kafai for an excellent, introduction, excellent, the talk on not only computational, not only coding but also the computational, participation. Next, we have our Korean speaker, Professor Seo Jung-yeon. You speak on.
저는 듣기 좋게 한국말로 간단하게 시작을 하겠습니다. 지금 두 분 연사분이 굉장히 중요한 말씀을 해주셨는데 제가 조금 더 이해를 돕기 위해서 조금만 더 설명을 좀 추가를 하고 토의를 할까 합니다. 지금 소프트웨어의 중요성에 대해서 계속 얘기를 하고 매우 중요하기 때문에 교육에 빨리 반영하고 모든 학생들이 배울 수 있게 해야 한다라는 것을 두 분께서 굉장히 중요하게 설명을 해주셨습니다. 이걸 가만히 보면은 우리가 세상이 이렇게 바뀌고 있는데 우리가 역사 시간에 많이 배웠듯이 18세기 말에 증기기관이라는 새로운 기술로 산업화가 시작이 됐습니다. 그때 그 새로운 기술에 따라서 나타난 학문들이 수학이나 과학과 같은 그런 신학문이 나왔죠. 근데 그런 신학문을 교육하는 것을 거부한 나라가 있습니다. 조선입니다. 그리고 그러한 신학문을 교육하는 것을 굉장히 빨리 받아들인 나라가 있습니다. 일본입니다. 그 결과는 우리가 다 잘 알고 있습니다. 이제 20세기 들어서 컴퓨팅 과학이라고 하는 새로운 학문이 컴퓨터와 통신 기술의 발전과 함께 소프트웨어라고 하는 엄청난 도구를 만들게 되었습니다. 마이크로 프로세서에 들어간 그 하드웨어하고 세계 어디서나 데이터를 공유하게 하는 통신 기술, 거기에 그것들을 가지고 뭐든지 만들 수 있는 소프트웨어라고 하는 이러한 기술을 합해서 우리가 인류 역사상 최고의 메타 테크놀로지라고 부릅니다. 메타 기술이라고 하는 거는 모든 기술이 사용하는 기술이라는 뜻입니다. 이거는 마치 옛날에 증기기관이나 전기와 같이 사회나 경제에 엄청난 변혁을 이끌어내는 중요한 기술이 된다라는 것입니다. 이미 우리는 이걸 보고 있습니다. 애플이라는 회사가 이 기술을 이용해서 세계 최고의 핸드폰 생산업체였던 노키아를 무너뜨렸습니다. 스마트폰이 나온 다음에 노키아는 딱 5년 만에 망하고 말았습니다. 문을 닫았는데 사실은 그때까지는 세계 최고의 제조업체였고 최대의 시장 마켓을 가지고 있던 회사가 5년 만에 망하는 일은 제조업 역사상 없던 일입니다. 이것을 가능하게 한 것이 바로 소프트웨어 능력입니다. 이제 이러한 일들은 자동차 산업, 금융 등 여러 가지 곳에서 나타나게 될 것이고 이것이 이제 새로운 사조가 될 것이라고 다들 보고 있습니다. 옛날에는 소프트웨어 그러면 컴퓨터 안에서 도는 거라고 생각을 했습니다. 이제는 소프트웨어가 컴퓨터를 벗어나게 됐고 모든 분야와 연합을 해서 융합을 되면서 그동안 보지 못했던 새로운 제품과 서비스가 나오게 되면서 기존 업체들을 위협하게 될 겁니다. 이제는 이러한 능력을 갖춘 개인, 기업, 국가는 100년 전에 산업화에 성공했던 그런 국가들처럼 부흥하게 될 거고 그렇지 못한 개인, 기업, 국가는 산업화에 실패한 조선이라는 나라와 같은 결말을 가지게 될 거라고 봅니다. 이제는 소프트웨어가 선택이 아니고 필수입니다. 소프트웨어는 더 이상 응용이 아니고 기초입니다. 이제 소프트웨어의 근간이 되는 정보과학 교육을 읽기, 쓰기나 산수와 같은 기초 역량으로 모든 사람에게 교육해야 되는 이유가 바로 거기에 있는 겁니다. 소프트웨어 교육은 국가나 기업을 위해서가 아니라 개인을 위해서도 매우 중요합니다. 디지털화가 되는 모든 게 디지털화가 되는 디지털 세상에서 살아가야 되는 이러한 학생들에게 소프트웨어에 대한 기본 역량이 없다는 것은 뭐와 같냐 하면 글을 못 읽고 숫자 계산을 못하는 사람이 현대 사회를 살아가는 것과 똑같다라고 보고 있습니다. 얼마나 힘들겠습니까? 이런 차원에서 미래에는 정보 능력의 격차가 빈부의 격차보다 훨씬 더 심각한 사회 문제가 될 겁니다. 지금 우리 옆에 앉으신 야스민 교수님께서 말씀하셨듯이 그래서 모든 학생들이 어떤 집단만이 참여하는 교육이 아니라 남자애들만 좋아하는 교육이 아니라 그 남자애들이 교육 좋아하니까 걔네들이 잘하니까 가만 냅두자 이런 교육이 아닙니다. 그렇기 때문에 공교육에서 모든 학생들에게 다 시켜야 된다는 겁니다. 서울에 있는 능력 있는 강남에서만 시키는 게 아니고 지방 도서에 있는 그런 학생들한테도 이런 교육의 기회를 주는 그것이 매우 중요한 때가 됐다라는 겁니다. 대한민국도 사실 2018년부터 한다고 지금 교육을 발표를 했는데 문제는 초등학교 6년 동안 다 통틀어서 17시간 가르치겠답니다. 중학교 3년 동안 통틀어서 34시간 가르치겠다고 하고 고등학교에서는 선택 과목으로 한답니다. 수능에서 반영하지 않는 과목을 선택으로 했을 때 어떻게 될까? 안 봐도 압니다. 근데 이런 것들이 어떤 거를 나타내느냐? 지금 두 분께서 굉장히 많이 설명을 하셨는데 아워 오브 코드라는 거 일주일에 1시간씩 코딩하자라는 운동입니다. 그것도 부족하기 때문에 우리 야스민 교수님은 그걸 더 깊이 있게 해야 된다라는 이야기를 계속 하시는 거예요. 근데 우리나라는 아직 굉장히 늦게 진행하고 있다라는 겁니다. 그래서 이제는 우리가 소프트웨어 교육 강화를 위해서 좀 더 혁신적인 교육 정책을 고려해야 할 때가 됐다라고 저는 생각하고 있습니다. 오늘 두 분 강연 굉장히 감명 깊게 들었는데요. 첫 번째 질문은 코드.org, 아워 오브 코드 같은 그런 운동 굉장히 중요한 민간 주도의 소프트웨어 교육 봉사라고 생각하는데 그런데 이제 소프트웨어 교육이 참여를 기반해서 협동으로 이끌어내는데 굉장히 중요한 거로 되는데 이러한 것들은 이제 우리가 개인적인 역량으로서의 소프트웨어 역량도 중요하지만 사회적인 어떤 협력하고 소프트웨어 공학에서 굉장히 중요한 게 협동입니다. 한 사람이 만들어내는 건 없기 때문에 그래서 계속 협동하는, 소통하는 이런 얘기가 자꾸 나오게 되는데요. 이런 측면에서 굉장히 중요하게 됩니다. 근데 우리가 이렇게 보니까 미국에도 지금 그래서 K-12라는 게 이제 유치원서부터 고등학교 3학년까지 그 소프트웨어 교육을 많이 시킨다라고 되어 있는데 지금 우리나라에서 굉장히 어려운 게 교사 확보입니다. 이거를 잘 가르칠 수 있는 교사가 굉장히 부족합니다. 그래서 제가 보기에는 아마 아까 제임스가 멘트를 하셨는데 교사들을 위한 어떤 컨텐츠라든가 이런 것을 만들고 있다 뭐 이런 걸 하셨는데 혹시 거기에 대해서 좀 더 소개해 주실 게 있는지 좀 간단하게 좀 부탁을 드리고 싶습니다.
Yeah, so with code.org, we have a huge emphasis on teaching teachers. We call it professional development. So the way we did it at code.org is we had a series of, we called it Teach the Teacher programs, where we got a group of several hundred teachers who we taught how to become teachers of teaching other teachers. So they would then, this core group of teachers would go out into different school districts and run workshops for other teachers to teach them how to teach materials. We're not trying to give every teacher a computer science degree. That's impossible. What we're trying to do is teach the teachers how to run the curriculum. Because one of the great things about computer science is computers can be used to help teach the students. It's a very interactive program. And so we rely very heavily on videos and exercises and software to do the hard work of actually teaching the knowledge. So the teachers don't have to be the experts. The teachers can be the facilitators. The teachers learn how to help the students go through the program, but they don't have to have the answers themselves.
I think maybe we can have a group discussion after Professor the other the speakers continue to speak. So 우리 김현철 교수님 하시죠.
두 분 그 과츠만하고 그다음에 카파이 교수님 말씀 잘 들었는데 두 분이 하고 계시는 코드닷 ORG하고 스크래치가 우리나라 소프트웨어 교육에 미친 그 영향이 엄청나다는 것은 여러분들이 조금만 관심 가지시면 다 알 겁니다. 그래서 이 두 분의 얘기를 여기서 듣게 된 것은 굉장히 좀 기쁘게 생각을 하고요. 저는 이런 얘기를 할 때 산업 경제와 디지털 경제 두 개로 분리해서 생각하는 것을 좋아합니다. 저를 비롯해서 많은 선생님들 그리고 이제 기존 세대들은 산업 경제에 딱 적합한 커리큘럼으로 교육을 받아서 산업 경제에서 성공적으로 살고 있는 사람들이고 우리의 아이들은 전혀 다른 디지털 경제를 살아갈 아이들입니다. 새로운 역량이 필요하고 그런데 이제 문제는 산업 경제에서 성공적으로 교육받았던 우리가 디지털 경제 시대를 살아갈 아이들을 가르쳐야 되는 그 상황이 많은 문제를 지금 만들어내고 있습니다. 지금 여러 가지 문제들을. 그래서 그 관점에서 우리가 생각을 하면은 우리나라는 그러면은 이런 산업 경제에 맞는 커리큘럼이 언제 시작이 됐느냐? 1950년 6.25 한국 전쟁 이후에 본격적으로 국가가 산업화를 시작하면서 그럼 산업화에 필요한 인재들을 양성을 시켜야 되겠다 학교에서. 그럼 거기에 맞는 인재를 정의를 하고 거기에 맞는 커리큘럼을 만든 겁니다. 우리가 배우고 있는 커리큘럼은 70년 된 커리큘럼입니다. 60년 된 커리큘럼이죠. 산업화 시대에 아주 최적화된 커리큘럼, 그다음에 산업화 시대에 맞는 교사, 산업화 시대에 맞는 여러 가지 교육 산업들, 그다음에 대학 입시 교육 체제가 산업 경제에 굉장히 최적화된 형태로 우리가 만들어져 있고 거기에서 안정적인 생태계가 지금 만들어져 있습니다. 근데 우리는 지금 무슨 얘기를 하고 있냐면은 디지털 경제에서의 새로운 역량을 얘기하고 있습니다. 우리 아이들이 살아갈 세상. 우리가 압니까? 어른들이 모른다고 생각해요, 저는요. 사실은요. 그러면은 새로운 인재를 키우기 위한 역량 교육에서 새로운 혁신이 필요하고 새로운 시도가 필요한 겁니다. 예를 들면은 새로운 과목이 들어와야 됩니다. 현재 커리큘럼 바뀌어야 됩니다. 변화가 필요합니다. 교사 양성 체제 바뀌어야 됩니다. 평가 방식, 대학 입시 방식 바뀌어야 됩니다. 왜 그럼 지금 것들은요 30년에 필요한 인재를 양성하는 데 굉장히 최적화되어 있기 때문에 미래에는 적합하지 않습니다. 그래서 이러한 그 중심에 지금 우리가 얘기하고 있는 컴퓨테이셔널 띵킹 소프트웨어 교육이 있는 겁니다. 그럼 이것이 들어올 때 무슨 문제를 일으키냐? 기존의 트래디셔널한 전통적인 교육 생태계가 반발을 하게 되는 거죠. 그 과목 가르치면 안 된다. 그 과목한테 시간 주면 안 된다. 우리가 어떻게 가르치냐. 뭐 여러 가지 문제가 발생을 하는 거죠. 그럼에도 불구하고 소프트웨어 교육이 필수 과목으로 2018년부터 조금이나마 들어오게 된 거죠. 그래서 그래도 여전히 그런 트래디셔널 서브젝트들이 전통적인 과목들과의 불협화음과 마찰이 있습니다. 그래서 제 첫 번째 질문은 저는 두 가지 질문이 있는데요. 첫 번째 질문은 그럼 전통적인 과목과 생태계에 어떻게 우리가 잘 get along을 할 수 있을까? 잘 조합을 해서 잘 나갈 수 있을까? 이게 이제 첫 번째 어떤 그 해외에서의 그런 경험들이나 이런 것들 좀 듣고 싶은 거고요. 두 번째 질문. 새로운 교수학습 방법적인 시도가 필요합니다. 왜 그러냐면요. 산업경제 시대에 우리가 하고 있는 여러분들도 지금 여기 학생들이 보이는데 그런 교육 받고 있을 겁니다. 제 생각에는요. 산업경제 시 필요한 역량 교육을 받고 있는 거예요. 예를 들어서 그 시대의 교육은 어떻게 하냐면은 기존에 만들어진 지식을 단순히 전달하는 교육만 하고 있어요. 그리고 평가는 어떻게 하냐? 전달 제대로 받았는지 시험 봅니다. 너 제대로 아냐 모르냐? 이것은 미래에 필요한 역량은 아니거든요. 그래서 우리가 소프트웨어 교육을 한다고 하면은 지식 전달보다는 창의와 창조가 더 중요하고 그다음에 경쟁과 소유보다는 협업과 공유가 더 중요합니다. 이걸 어떻게 가르칠 건가? 이걸 지금 현재 교육 체계에서 어떻게 가르칠 건가? 이게 문제인 거죠. 그런데 저희가 소프트웨어 교육 그다음에 프로그램 교육을 하면서 지금 나타난 현상을 보세요. 저기 코드닷 ORG와 스크래치가 같지만요. 이 둘 공부하는 걸 가만히 보세요. 굉장히 글로벌 베이스로 커리큘럼이 만들어져 있고 글로벌 베이스로 공부가 진행되고 있어요. 지금 아까 여기 오기 전에 그 대기실에서 잠깐 두 분하고 얘기를 했는데 스크래치 파운데이션에 한국 사람이 가입한 사람이 오늘 날짜로 8.2 밀리언이에요. 800만 명이 한국 사람이 가입자예요. 그중에 한 명은 나고 그중에 한 명은 우리 아이예요. 한국 사람이 만든 프로젝트가 11 밀리언이에요. 1,100만 개가 들어가 있어요. 이게 수학에서 그렇게 합니까? 과학에서 그렇게 합니까? 국어에서 그렇게 합니까? 영어에서 그렇게 합니까? 컴퓨터 소프트웨어 교육에서 바로 그렇게 하고 있는 거거든요. 글로벌한 교육이 지금 진행되고 있어요. 또 하나는 스크래치나 코드 다우라지를 보세요. 교육이요. 공유와 협업 기반으로 움직이고 있어요. 친구와 경쟁하고 시험 보고 이런 체제가 아닌 거예요. 공유와 글로벌하게 그렇게 진행되고 있고 리믹스도 그런 거고요. 리믹스도 그런 거고요. 이거는 저한테 그다음에 우리 교육자들 한국 교육 시스템한테 굉장히 큰 인사이트를 주고 있는 거라고 저는 생각을 합니다. 그래서 그러한 새로운 미래 역량을 가르칠 수 있는 교육 시스템, 교수학습 방법, 평가 방법 여기에 대해서 어떤 생각들을 가지고 계신지 그리고 그런 것들에 대한 생각을 가지고 두 분이 진행을 하고 있는지 이런 얘기를 좀 듣고 싶습니다. 고맙습니다.
So I think maybe we need to recap the questions in a short sentence in the future. But I think we will proceed to 우리 선화 여중의 그 김태민 교장 선생님께 먼저 말씀을 하시도록 하고 그렇게 진행하도록 하겠습니다.
네, 인사드리겠습니다. 선화여중의 김태민 교장입니다. 저는 오늘 이 자리에 온 건 교육 학문적인 측면에 교수님들이 두 분이 토론을 해 주실 거고, 다만 저는 그 이러닝 최초부터 그 장학사 시절부터 우리 그 학교 교육에서의 실제적인 이러닝을 어떻게 추진해 왔는가, 그리고 또 지금은 교육과정을 심의하고 그 국가 수준의 교육과정을 만들어가는 자리에 있습니다. 그렇기 때문에 실질적으로 학교에서 과연 지금 소프트웨어 교육을 어떻게 접목하려고 하고, 그리고 또 그거에 더해서 한번 우리가 세계 글로벌 시장에서 어떻게 가고 있는지에 대한 질의를 좀 해보려고 합니다. 그래서 이제 우리가 사실은 국가 수준에서는 2018년부터 적용되게 되어 있는 문이과 통합과정과 NCS 기반 교육과정에서 이미 우리는 소프트웨어 교육을 명시화하고 있고, 사실은 반강제적이지만 반드시 의무적으로 하도록 하고 있습니다. 그래서 그거에 선에서 우리는 두 가지의 노력을 하고 있습니다. 하나는 뭐냐면 학교는 우선 2017년까지 선도 학교 개념의 소프트웨어 교육을 수행하고 있고, 그리고 컴퓨팅 사고 능력을 기르기 위해서 로봇 실험 학교라는 또 캐리스 중심의 그 단회학교 실험을 하고 있습니다. 이 두 가지를 저희 학교는 다 하고 있는 거고, 그 과정에서 제가 몇 가지 변화를 생각해 보자 하는 것입니다. 사실은 처음에 소프트웨어 교육을 하는 학교들은 대부분은 프로그래밍을 약 84%가 하고 있습니다. 그리고 피지컬 컴퓨터나 로봇 활용 교육을 통해서 컴퓨팅 사고 능력을 향상하기 위해서 한 36%의 학교들이 진행을 하고 있습니다. 이것은 160개의 실험 학교를 대상으로 통계가 나온 건데요. 그러면 저희들은 어떤 생각을 하냐면, 우선 수업 방법에서 어떻게 접근할 것인가라는 관점에서 첫 번째는 알고리즘 수업 설계를 주축으로 지금 모델을 구상하고 있고요. 그 다음에 두 번째는 소위 그 언프로그드 활동 수업 쪽에 어떻게 접목할 것이냐 하는 부분, 그 다음에 언어 기반인 브룩 언어 기반에서 어떻게 그 컴퓨터 소프트웨어 교육을 접목할 것인가, 그 다음에 텍스트 기반에서는 과연 C나 C++를 어떻게 도입해 가서 할 것인가라는 고민을 하고 있고요. 그 다음에 이제 피지컬 컴퓨팅이라든가 또는 로봇 활용을 통해서 컴퓨팅 사고를 어떻게 전개할 것인가 이런 고민을 가지고 진행하고 있다고 말씀을 드리면서 문제는 교육 내용에서 구체적으로 살펴보면 어떤 걸 하고 있냐면 문제 상황에 대해서 핵심 내용을 중심으로 학 교과별 재구조화를 하는 노력을 하고 있습니다. 사실 여기에 교수님께 두 분 발표 교수님께도 또 질의를 해야 되는 부분입니다. 예를 들면 지금과 같이 소위 그 org.com에서 하는 형태로 모든 사람에게 공유하고 공개적으로 1시간 이상씩 들어가서 하도록 한다는 방법도 있겠지만 저는 실질적으로 단위학교에서 또는 그 모든 사람들의 참여와 공유를 빨리 학교 교육제도에서 도입하려면 문제는 모든 교과 교수들이 또는 교과의 선생님들이 결국은 교사 수준인 교육과정에서 컴퓨터 소프트웨어가 기반이 된 스팀을 즉 2018년부터 문이과 통합과정이 이런 기반으로 들어가는 그런 교수학습의 형태로 전환돼야 됩니다. 따라서 그러려면 우리는 지금 큰 노력을 해야 됩니다. 하나는 뭐냐면 선생님들을 어떻게 교육할 것인가에 대한 고민을 여기서 풀어야 되는 부분입니다. 두 번째는 선생님들의 고민이 된다면 그 다음에는 캐리스나 또는 교육개발원이나 직업능력개발원을 통해서 공교육기관이 과연 어떻게 이런 코딩이라든가 프로그램이라든가 또는 컨텐츠를 개발하고 체제 구축을 해서 지원할 것인가에 대한 고민을 해야 되고 이것은 결국은 공교육 체제 내에서 지원과 공교육에서의 공교육비를 투자하지 않으면 안 될 것이다 라고 생각을 합니다. 물론 미국의 상황은 좀 다른 것 같습니다. 제가 들어보니까 그것은 뭐냐면 물론 공교육비에서 지원이 되지만 이런 소위 말하는 다양한 계층에서의 지원 때문에 아마 무료로 다 가능하지만 저개발 국가라든가 늦게 참여하는 국가들은 빠른 시간 내에 도입하기 위해서는 결국은 내셔널 커리큘럼인 그 국가 수준의 교육 과정에서 어쨌든 공교육비를 투자하는 그런 사례가 필요할 것이라고 생각합니다. 따라서 오늘 두 분 교수님께 지가 생각하고 있는 것은 모든 교과에서 컴퓨팅 사고 또 컴퓨팅에 참여를 해야 되는데 거기에서 우리가 지금 그런 교사 교육이라든가 아니면 컴퓨터 교육 사용하기 위한 컨텐츠를 개발하고 지원하는 체제를 갖추고 있는지 질의를 드려보고 싶고요. 그 다음에 두 번째 질의를 드리고 싶은 것은 우리 학교 교육에서는 어쨌든 교실이 다 컴퓨팅 교실화 돼야 됩니다. 그러기 위해서는 스마트 교실의 확대라든가 또는 소위 말하는 무슨 인터넷 환경을 개선해야 된다든가 이런 부분이 상당히 주가 되는 부분인데 왜냐하면 실질적으로 접근한다는 게 학교에서부터 아까 교수님 발표 중에 공교육에서부터 학교에서부터 소위 빨리 실현해야 되겠다라는 그 주장을 하셨는데 그 상태에서 보면 이게 엄청난 재원이 또 환경 구축을 위한 재원 마련의 정책이 필요하게 됩니다. 따라서 이런 정책을 구체적으로 미국이나 선진국은 어떻게 가고 있는지 우리나라는 상당 부분 지금 공감을 하고 있습니다. 그게 뭐냐면 문이과 통합과정과 내셔널 소위 말하는 NCS 기반 교육과정이 시행되는과 동시에 이런 것들에 대대적인 투자를 하려고 하고 있습니다. 네, 이렇게 말씀을 드리면서 제가 이제 이 학교 전문가이기 때문에 혹시 좀 동이 떨어지지 않았나 하는 생각도 듭니다. 감사합니다.
감사합니다. I think the principal Kim addressed. in addition to other issues that the people, the panelists addressed, that he emphasized that this computer-based, it's a teaching computational thinking. Not only teaching, computational thinking is enough. We need to teach we need to broaden this to other classes, like other scientific classes, or other language classes. So that's I think an important aspect that I caught. So now I think, given all the questions, and I think it's hard to remember all those questions. But I think we can first start with the general discussion, and with the questions in mind, and at the end, then we will try to the catch up with the questions that we missed. Okay. So you want to start, James?
Yeah. So I think one common question was, how do we introduce computer science into other classes that are not computer science? And I think that's a fantastic opportunity to begin. For example, if you're in a physics class and you're learning equations like F equals ma, or you're learning how the physical world works, what better way to learn than to simulate it by writing a computer program? I'm in the computer game industry, and every day when I'm writing a computer game, we're using things like trigonometry and physics and other basic forces. And so it's very easy to create simple programs to demonstrate and simulate the reality. And then kids can use the computer like a sandbox. They can experiment, well, what if gravity was 5 times stronger? What would things look like? Or if you're simulating, I don't know, a biological environment with wolves and sheep, why is it if you have more wolves than sheep, what happens to the ecology? You can use computers to simulate these things.
I think at yesterday's panels, we actually heard the term project-based learning, which already, even without computers, suggests the integration of different subjects and proposes a model which I think for elementary and middle school is very appropriate to make use of your 17 hours. Here is a tip. Here's how you can double your hours. Now, by taking the 17 hours of your primary school education and connecting it to either math, science, or language arts. And one concrete example I can give you, over 25 years ago, I did the first project in asking children actually to design instructional math games. And this was always connected to the math curriculum, like rational numbers, or to the science curriculum around the planet system, about the biology. So we were able to double the number of hours available to students and to connect it right to the curriculum. I think one of the big challenges we had 25 years ago is that programming, computer science, had no connection to the rest of the curriculum. But I think we heard from all the comments today, computing now is everywhere. We can no longer ignore it. And in particular for the elementary and middle school curriculum, the integration of computing, of making it meaningful. I mean, all kids know teaching software. Well, they can actually design teaching software to teach younger students in their school. You can connect it to different subject matters. And it's perfectly appropriate for that age group as a foundation, as an introduction into the main ideas of computing. So when you come to high school, you have some experience and you can take more specialized courses.
So I think this is actually an excellent answers, and maybe this is a good time to go back to one of the questions raised by Professor Hyun-Chul Kim about how we harmonize the soft education with the rest of the course. That's one point that Professor Kim raised, and in fact, it's a partial answer. But on the other hand, this soft education is competing with the other courses. So, I was wondering how we, resolve this kind of situation in the short term. And eventually, I think this will not be a big problem. But in the short term, how we address this problem. If you have some wisdoms, maybe Professor Kafai or yeah.
I think Professor Kafai just acknowledged the right answer, which is you integrate it. You add computer science to other curriculum. So you find an existing subject, and instead of, for example, drawing a graph on paper, you write a program to draw the graph, I find personally I learn material like trigonometry way better when I'm actually using it to do something than simply learning it on a chalkboard or on a piece of paper. And so if you're forced to use these materials, these other classes to actually accomplish a goal, I think you're way more likely to actually retain the knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
I think we also have to prepare the teachers for this kind of integrated teaching, and this puts a responsibility of the pedagogical universities and teacher preparation to model what it actually looks like when they do this integration in mathematics, in the sciences, or in the language arts. So when they go into their student teaching and come into the classroom, they have an idea on what it means both to kind of structure the curriculum. We need to write curriculum for this, but then also as teachers to successfully support students and create an implementation in the classroom. So it can't just be all, on the teachers there. We have to provide models on what that looks like and prepare the incoming generation of teachers to teach this way. Because otherwise we're asking a lot for people to just jump into the cold water to learn a new type of teaching, of project-based learning, to learn also new subject matter computing, to understand how they can introduce the key concepts of computing, like algorithms, like control structures, like variables, which I think all students at the elementary and middle school level actually can learn.
So I think I would like to point out that it is most desirable if we can change our education, college way. The college, system, the education system for teaching teachers. If we can change that, that would be great. But unfortunately, that would take a long time, right? So we have a dilemma, right? So how are we going to solve that problem? Maybe I think a code.org kind of movement is one way to solve the problem. As the problem is that the society is changing far more faster than the education system. So how are we going to resolve that? That's a challenge that we have. Do you have any comment on? Yeah.
Again, there's this notion of the flipped classroom model, which is popular. The flipped classroom model says, the traditional classroom model says you learn something in school, then you go home and you do homework at home. And the flipped classroom model flips it. It says, okay, you learn the material at home by watching videos, and then you come into the classroom and you actually do the homework in the classroom, where you can collaborate with other students, where the teacher is there to facilitate you and sort of oversee the process of actually doing the work. And this is exactly what, in some ways, the code.org model is. The material you learn by watching videos and so on, and then you actually do the exercises with other students in small groups. In fact, there's plenty of research that shows the optimum number of students to work together is these teams of 2. A team of students working together, both students learn way more than if the student tries to do the work by themselves, because the students can help each other out and can collaborate that way.
Yeah. Any comment from Professor Kafai? You have any comment on that?
We have Hour of Code in Scratch. We have Scratch Day every May in year. I think it's the 3rd Saturday when worldwide people interested in Scratch come together to do an hour of Scratch or a whole day. And why not create a teacher day where teachers come together and learn how to do projects? I think Hour of Code will agree. One of the things I know from having worked over the last decade with, hundreds of teachers and thousands of students, the one thing I ask every teacher who participates in one of my research projects, you have to make the program yourself first. Before you ask students to do this, you make one yourself so you understand what it means to program, what are some of the challenges, because this prepares you for what happens in the classroom. But we also know the teacher professional community is essential, not just for introducing, but also sustaining practice. So this is why I'm suggesting, why not create a national day? We focus a lot on students, but we also need to kind of provide a room for teachers to do that. Another great example is in the United States, but also now in Australia, there is every year a STEM National Video Game Challenge where students from all grade level in all different kind of programming platforms can submit games around STEM topics. They have designed their own. And I think that gives also, again, a great audience an opportunity to connect with others from local school classrooms to the larger nation. Set this up in Korea, but don't forget the teachers. Don't just, focus on the students. I think then you have a way to create the community. The group of teachers, because we have a 5% of teachers who will be very eager to go, and I think Principal Kim, I know, has already set this up in his middle school, but we need to reach all teachers in order to make this integration possible and successful.
Well, I think this is an excellent suggestion. That I was eager to hear, and I'm glad to hear that we need teachers our code day.
Korea could be the first. It's not done in the United States or everywhere else, so you can lead the trend.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, so I think that's an excellent suggestion. 아시다시피 우리가 학생들만 하지 말고 선생님들도 지금 여기 들어온 질문 중에 그런 질문도 있었는데 선생님들도 이런 그 아웃 코드 같은 것을 해서 선생님들도 배우게. 사실은 학생들 선생님들 같이 배워야 되는 거니까요. 아주 그 좋은 그 아이디어인 것 같습니다. Maybe Professor Seo is waiting for his turn. Yeah.
비슷한 얘기인데요. 질문이 보면은 그 다른 과목에서 소프트웨어를 활용해서 새로운 형식의 그 교육을 융합해서 하면 좋지 않겠냐. 굉장히 중요한 말씀입니다. 앞으로 그렇게 돼야 된다라고 보는데 그러기 위해서는 두 가지 전제 조건이요. 선생님들이 모든 타 교과목의 선생님들이 기본적으로 소프트웨어가 뭔지를 알고 있어야 됩니다. 그래야지 자기 영역에서 소프트웨어를 이용해서 새로운 교과 과목을 교과 내용을 만들 수도 있고 티칭할 수도 있고 그렇죠. 그럼 학생들도 마찬가지예요. 학생들도 내가 물리학을 들을 때, 생물을 들을 때, 화학을 들을 때 아니면 인문학, 사회나 역사를 들을 적에 거기서 만일 소프트웨어와 연동돼서 움직인다면 그때 이미 학생들이 그거를 알아들을 수 있는 기본 소양을 갖추고 있어야 됩니다. 소프트웨어에 대한 기본 능력이 있을 때 그것이 효과를 볼 수 있는 거죠. 그렇기 때문에 이거는 어떻게 보면은 아주 기본적인 소프트웨어 교육을 빨리 시작해야만 그래서 어퍼 레벨로 올라갔을 적에 그런 융합된 교육이 시작이 될 수 있을 거라고 지금 보고 있고요. 그다음에 지금 우리 교육부에서 굉장히 걱정하는 게 정보과학을 가르칠 교사를 재교육시킨다 또는 타 교과 선생님들을 교육을 시켜서 이쪽으로 옮긴다 뭐 이런 얘기를 하는데 저는 그거보다 좀 더 확장돼서 제가 받은 건 모든 선생님들한테 이 소프트웨어 교육을 다 시켜야 되는 때가 돼가고 있구나라는 걸 지금 느끼고 있습니다.
네. 그게 지금 서 교수님 말씀하신 게 조금 전에 이제 다른 분들 말씀하고 다 일맥상통하는 것 같습니다. 아주 좋은 서제시. I have one question. We think that Korea is far behind in the software education. We came late, but I think last year the President Park Geun-hye of Korea declared that software education must be a mandate, and so we started implementing this education system, and I think we are making progress. And so on the other hand, I hear from both of you that in U.S. it's much more open to each school. So in a way, Korea is more. In a way, we are in lucky or ahead of the U.S. So what is your comment?
I think you're at the forefront of a new trend. I think the idea of mandating computer science education is fantastic, and I think very few countries have done it. Vietnam has done it. Korea is doing it. The UK has done it. America has not done it. You know, there are individual states in America who are doing it, but as an entire country, you have an opportunity to figure these hard issues out. It won't be easy. You have to figure out how to get teachers more involved and how to introduce it into other subjects. But I think your students will surprise you. Your students will help you lead the way. You know, there was a question earlier about the technology and the budget. I don't think that's an issue. I think the cost is, especially today, is minimal. Tablets and phones is all you need to teach computer science. And almost every student in high school has a smartphone in their pocket already. You don't necessarily need to, I'm guessing, you don't need to provide those. And even in classrooms nowadays, you know, Android tablets are very inexpensive compared to the cost earlier. So I think the materials are there and your students are eager to help you figure this out.
Then we go back to questions that we missed. So actually, Professor Hyun-Chul Kim was talking about the systems for his second question. You know, can you rephrase or to remind us what the
그 전통적인 과목들을 가르치는 방식이 거의 지식을 전달하고 그다음에 지식을 제대로 전달받지 테스트하고 그런 걸 중심으로 모든 교사 교육부터 시작해서 커리큘럼 그다음에 학교라는 그 시스템, 학교의 심지어 학교의 모습까지 이렇게 이제 정해지는 상태인데 아까 말씀드렸듯이 소프트웨어 교육, 이제 디지털 미래의 역량은 지식 전달이 아니고 창의적이고 협업적이고 이런 것들을 이제 강조를 하고 있는데 전통적인 교육 시스템과 체제에서는 그게 불가능하다. 저는 그렇게 생각을 하고 있습니다. 그래서 여러 가지 시도들이 나오는데 그 중에 하나가 아까 얘기한 것처럼 저는 세 가지를 보고 있는데 글로벌한 교육이 지금 글로벌한 기준으로 가고 있는 거, 또 하나가 협업과 공유 중심으로 가고 있는 거, 또 하나가 학교에서뿐만이 아니고 code.org처럼 기업들, 사회들이 참여하는 어떤 형태의 교육으로 가고 있다. 저는 그렇게 생각하고 그게 앞으로 제대로 가기 위한 방향인가라는 거가 제 질문이었고요. 아까 덧붙여서 짧게 또 하나는 아까 카파이 교수님이 25년 전에는 컴퓨터 사이언스가 독립된 과목이었다. 그런데 지금은 딴 쪽으로 머지가 돼가지고 어떤 컴퓨테이셔널 서브젝트로 이렇게 가고 있다. 그런데 미래는 어떻게 될 건가? 그래서 얼마 전에 맨하탄에 있는 Q2L이라는 고등학교 사례를 제가 들었는데요. 전통적인 과목들을 다 없애버리고 새로운 과목 체제를 만들어가지고 하는 실험학교 얘기를 들었습니다. 그래서 그런 것들이 우리가 가야 될 방향인가 아니면 그런 것들에 대해서 어떻게 생각하시는지 듣고 싶습니다.
Yeah. Again, the question is too long.
I think that a couple pieces there. I think the notion of private-public partnership is very important. In America, organizations like Code.org are funded by private organizations. So Google and Microsoft and Apple and these other, Facebook, these are the organizations who have funded Code.org because it's out of self-interest. They need programmers and they don't see enough programmers. So it's very self-interested. I have to believe here in Korea, organizations like Samsung and others have the same motivation to help provide materials and funding for these kinds of programs, even if government funding sometimes is slower to catch up. As far as the cooperation, I completely agree that the nature of work changes, and in the modern corporation, everything is done in teamwork. It's very rare to have individual work, and so education should also be more cooperative. And I think projects, as it has been mentioned, I think projects where students work together to accomplish something are not only more fun for the students, but also opportunities to learn how to cooperate and collaborate on these kinds of works. And if you give students goals to achieve and let them figure out for themselves how to achieve the goals, it forces this sort of creativity and frankly more learning than simply asking them to repeat facts on a test.
Yeah.
So I think you have an opportunity here. I mean, obviously we have traditional ways of assessing programming competence. But as you pointed out, you're designing a new curriculum. You can think about new ways of teaching and also new ways of assessing. I suggested earlier having global exhibits like the National Video Game Challenge. You can also make that more local or district-wide. It doesn't have to be always the whole country. And I think there you have the vote of the public as a way, as providing feedback and assessment. But I disagree actually with James and many others. There is, to my taste, too much emphasis on what in America people call the 2 C's, college and career ready with computing. Yes, computing is important, but I would like to add a 3rd C. I really think about it as a civic enterprise as well, like really the traditional reading and writing. Because computing is everywhere. And I don't think we prepare, our goal, especially at the elementary and middle school, is to turn everybody into a computer scientist. Honestly, I mean, this complex systems which we're using and which we'll be using in the future, I mean, a few, groups, very competent people will kind of design them. I think the real challenge is the large majority of people who at their workplace at some point will use some programming, or more importantly, as Mr. Gewürzmann pointed out, they will work in large teams of which software engineers and computer scientists are part, and they need a way of communicating, of understanding, without necessarily, understanding all the intricacies of computer science. I think that is really what teamwork is all about, and this is why I think about it as a civic issue. So yes, career and college is very important, but let's not forget education isn't just about this, it's also about civic participation. And in that line, if we think about, what we teach and how we assess, we need to kind of bring this in alignment. Also, who knows 20 years from now what the jobs of the future are going to be, what kind of programming languages we're going to use. So I think having a more general goal, which is usually the purpose of education, will kind of help us set appropriate but ambitious goals, especially for primary and middle school education. Once you come into high school and especially college, things kind of get more specialized, and that's appropriate. But I think, in primary and middle school, we want to kind of really have a larger civic general agenda.
So I think I'd like to kind of resonate Professor Kafai's the statement that in the university level, nowadays in many leading universities all around the world, they are emphasizing data science education. The data science, what is data science? It's a computer science, or the computational thinking with the big data should be a fundamental education to all discipline. Not only engineers, but also medicine, and also the social science, and liberal art. So this is this computational thinking or software education is becoming universal. So this is something that one of the incentives that every student in the future should learn about computational thinking. I'd like to finish with the one question. This is more specific question about how we set up the incentives for. Again, you cannot just leave the individual student to just work hard on learning computer programming or computational thinking. What kind of incentives can we set up in the system, so that students really work hard with the tangible goals? That's the question that I would like to ask.
I don't think, all I know is I watched the hour of code being done in schools. And teacher after teacher after teacher told us that for the students who did it, it was far and away the most fun thing they had done in weeks. In some cases, some kids said it was the most fun thing they did all year. I think learning is its own motivation when it's fun. And I think programs like this one are inherently entertaining because it's that sense of mastery. And I think very few subjects give you that opportunity for immediate reinforcement the way that these kinds of programs can. And so I think done well, it is immensely entertaining and is its own motivation. That's my take.
I think, let's create special days. 25 years ago, I went to Costa Rica. They had a logo Olympics where kids came and celebrated their accomplishments. Let's have shorter versions of hackathon, because kids should actually sleep at night. I mean, they're not should work 24 hours, but have come together. We had scratchathons where kids come a whole day together aside from school, because as you pointed out, you have a limited number of hours in the school curriculum. So let's think realistically where outside of school, online, as well as in after school or the weekends, we can create opportunities for teachers, students, as well as parents to kind of engage in computing in different ways and supplement and support what you're doing already in school.
Yeah, Professor Sir, I think you will have some statement about relating this hackathon to college entrance. Just I'm joking.
저기 아니요. 그 제가 대한민국의 현실은 인센티브가 아니라 불이익을 주고 있습니다. 컴퓨터를 고등학교 때 너무 열심히 소프트웨어 공부를 하면요, 부모들이 다 말려요. 대학을 못 들어갑니다. 한국 학생들이 세계 정보 올림피아드에 가서 금메달 따온 거를 대학 입시에 그걸 쓰지를 못하게 돼 있습니다. 굉장히 이상한 현실이에요. 그래서 그러니까 그런 정말 영재들이 대학 입시에서 전혀 도움을 못 받으니까 오히려 거꾸로 말리고 있는 게 지금 그동안에, 그래서 그런 것들을 좀 우리 정부가 빨리 해결을 해서 소프트웨어 그 특별 전형을 실시하려고 합니다. 그래서 사실 2018년부터 서울의 대한민국의 메이저 대학들이 소프트웨어 특별 전형을 실시합니다. 실제로. 그래서 지금 여기 고대도 와 있고 서강대도 있고 성대도 있고 지금 그 하겠다고 약속한 대학들이 지금 8개 대학인데 아마 순식간에 한 20여 개 대학이 소프트웨어만 가지고 수시 모집을 할 수 있게 바꿀 겁니다. 그런 것이 아마 학생들한테는 현실적인 인센티브가 되지 않을까 그렇게 생각을 합니다.
Yeah, we found the same thing. We found the same thing with Code.org, which was we could not get districts to require computer science until we first got the universities to change the entrance requirements. Because too many colleges, for example, have requirements, entrance requirements in math and science, but they did not count computer science. So you had to have a certain number of credits in science, but computer science didn't count. Chemistry counted, calculus counted, trigonometry counted, computer science didn't count. And so first we had to change those requirements, and then we could go back to the schools and say, now you can start teaching it because the colleges will receive it. And so you do have to work both sides of that direction. You have to work on changing, as you say, the college entrance exams before you can then go and start requiring the computer science.
The Professor Kim Hyun? Yeah. Okay. But the last chance, 우리 김태민 교장님. 마지막. Well, now we had a really exciting discussions and the speeches. Thank you very much for your participation, and thank you for coming to this session. Thank you all. Yeah.